Almost got towards the end of the day, losing a little daylight, but thank God I live in Seattle. Even though it's looks kind of light, it's actually like 8:30 here, so it's good to live in the northern hemisphere. It's kind of nice during summertime. The sun stays out for longer. Get a lot of random people who like to talk, right? But anyways, as I went through my last video, kind of talked about where I was during college, how I thought politically, which was typically Marxist or neo-Marxist or whatever. That was kind of a recent thing, I would say about maybe 6 or 7 years ago. But I started to kind of float around, no, I'm just a socialist, or I'm a liberal or something. I hated that term because there's so much negative connotations for that. But basically, I just decided I wasn't a Marxist. But I mean, that wasn't the only ideology that I had. When I was in college, I believed I was also, I identified as a feminist. It wasn't until I started learning about it a little bit more in depth that I started to disagree with that distinction, but I'll go into detail with that. Kind of had to not walk or be in my car. Found a nice quiet spot so I could discuss this a little bit. But basically, like I said before, I was a history major, and Marxism was a lens to view history. Another lens was through feminism. And feminism was an interesting lens because from everything I've learned about it, they're going off of factual and objective claims, and from what I thought in college, everything that they were saying was rooted in reality. It wasn't until you start getting into some more abstract thought about what is the patriarchy, what does it mean to be a woman, what does it mean to be a man. Does society influence gender, or is it biological? Do men take over things because society tells us to, or do we do it because it's a biological function? It's a natural thing for men to take certain roles. It's a natural thing for women to take certain roles. And my opinion was more of a societal mindset. It wasn't until I started to see some of the reactions against the men's rights movement, and typically from more radical feminists, that I started to realize that feminism is way too abstract. It's not a concrete idea, and there's a lot of different ideas. So for me to label myself a feminist would mean that anybody's negative or positive connotations with feminism would be attached to them, and I don't really need that. I mean, if you're saying feminism is just gender equality, sure, I'm a feminist. If you're saying feminism means that you're a women's rights activist. Sure. But the moment that you start getting away from simple definitions and you start to get into academic feminism, that's when you start to get some issues. Issues such as, is the patriarchy biological? Is it something that men just automatically try and create because we're men? Or is patriarchy a social construct created by men in power to subjugate women? I don't know about that. I feel like any negative experiences that women have been going through is rooted in the Industrial Revolution and somewhat before that. Women have had a tough break throughout history, but they haven't always had disadvantaged positions throughout history. It kind of comes and goes, but women's current status of a homemaker and a childbearer and outside of common sense, in my opinion, I should say, from a historical perspective, is rooted in the Industrial Revolution. The men had to go to the factories for long periods of time, didn't really have time to help out, and they had to stay home. And it should be worth noting that nobody had any rights. Well, nobody had a lot of rights. Workers didn't have a lot of rights. That's kind of why we needed the workers' movement, and minorities didn't have a lot of rights, and they didn't really have a lot of rights until the 60s, really, unfortunately. And women didn't have a lot of rights, and that's why we needed the women's rights movement. Now, the problem that I have is during the 60s and 70s, and some could even argue the 80s, is feminism changed. It changed from this modernist mentality of trying to eliminate barriers for women to get into certain fields like white-collar jobs or big business, which was wildly successbody, and it's still growing. It's still great, and I support anybody, even feminists, that want to eliminate those barriers, because everybody deserves equality, but not equality of everybody deserves equal opportunity, and nobody should be disincluded from a job just because of what's in their pants. But what started to happen is feminism started to mix with Marxism and started to mix with postmodernism. And anybody who doesn't know postmodernism, it started off as an art movement, kind of a reaction against modernism, which was, the typical mindset of science can heal all our problems, that onward and upwards, the whole Star Trek mentality, I guess, and started to criticize all the things that science has brought us. Science. If science is so great, then why do we have the atomic bomb? If science is so great, then why do we have pesticides that are poisoning people? And so, some are actually legitimate criticisms, but their idea is that the reason why science is bad is because it's only through a white male, I guess cis point of view. And because we have this point of view, we can't objectively look at everything in actuality, because we can only see things through our privileged mindset. And so started postmodern feminism, and some would say third wave feminism. I don't really like those terms. It's modern liberal and rad feminism that is based in the idea that everything is a struggle, that it's the patriarchy versus women, and it's a class. Women are a lesser class, men are the oppressing class. And in postmodernism, it gets more and more abstract, that the patriarchy is less about men and more about a system. And this system, it kind of makes women weaker, frailer, and all these kind of things. And it makes men opportunistic and motivated and taking risks and all that kind of stuff. It just doesn't work when you find that what they consider to be a toxic man and a meek woman, if all you need to do is find counter examples of that. But to go a little bit further into postmodernism, feminism is basically white men are the scorn of the earth. They literally ruin the world. And you could argue that Europeans and Americans have made a lot of people's lives very difficult. But there's also, you can't just look at the negatives and say that the whole country or people or anything is to be blamed. And it's amazing how much a country can change in just a few generations. But to them, it doesn't matter. Things need to keep changing. Before, the idea of marriage was considered oppressive, and it's actually considered an empowering thing, but only for same sex or transsexuals, not for straight people, obviously. It's just, the idea is that people who have less privilege in this system actually are empowered to the point that whoever has the least amount of privileges has quite a bit of power and quite a voice too. To the point that it just is counterintuitive. If this system is so oppressive, then how is it so easy to subvert? How is it so that we can change our minds on hard moral questions like gay marriage within not even a generation, a decade? And I'm sure there's somebody who will say, "Oh, that was all feminism." But it makes you wonder that is there ever going to be a point where people will accept that we're living in an equal society, or does things need to just progressively change until everybody who's in majority is now a minority? Or is that even the goal, or is it just everybody to shake hands and live in peace? Or my problem is, if we actually achieve equality in any real sense of the word, like every single company has to have half men, half women, or has to have certain quotas based upon population figures or something, it just makes you wonder if that's really a free society. And can people be happy? Can people have a democracy if you have those kind of quotas? So yeah, I really don't consider myself a feminist, because I don't associate with liberal feminism. I definitely don't associate with radical feminism. I think patriarchy theory doesn't make sense. I don't agree with standpoint theory. I don't agree with feminist epistemology. I don't agree with feminist empiricism. I've read quite a few books. I may have to kind of dust them off and reread them, or do a little bit of research. But to be honest with you, I just can't consider myself one. It just doesn't. First of all, it doesn't fit my ideology. The only thing that it would kind of is that I'm a women's rights activist, and I believe that everybody should have an equal opportunity for jobs or whatever, service, whatever. I'm anti-segregation, but if that arbitrary kind of definition makes me a feminist to you, fine. But to me, I definitely don't identify that way. And if you do, it's okay. Because, like I said, I think everybody should have an equal opportunity. And people who need help should get help. In domestic violence, rape, whatever. But that should be for everybody. For my next video, I kind of wanted to go into how I came to the conclusion that I was a men's rights activist. And I'm actually one of the few that actually took a few classes where they talked about the men's rights movement in a very positive light. And that will be the next video. I'm hoping to hear back from Easy on Me. He was I'm gonna attempt to do my first response video to him, but only if he says it's okay to use the clips. But anyways, I hope everybody's having a good night, and this is Tim Huggins signing out.